Hi again, Melissa here. I'm going to be reading the third chapter, or the second chapter, the third reading that I'm going to be doing. So I've done the introduction and chapter one so far. For now, I'm going to also just pop in at the start that because if you're just watching this for the first time, you wouldn't have caught my original introduction. And in my introduction, I do always make it clear that when I wrote this book, I'd fully forgiven. So when I wrote this book, although some of these chapters are going to take you down into my depths, I don't hold any anger or resentment for what I have been through. And so I don't expect, or I'm not after pity, and definitely not after sympathy. And also at the same time, I'm also not after, I don't expect people to get angry with him, because I'm not angry with him at all. So yeah, just bear that in mind. And then on the other hand as well, if you're watching this, if you find that it might bring something up in your relationship, or if you're experiencing some of this stuff, it's a really good idea to talk to people around you. Find the person that you trust and have a coffee with them or a conversation with them, because you never know, it might not have to come to the extreme that I found myself in. Like, I look back and I was too scared to talk to anybody, and it spiraled out of control really, really quickly. So that's my before I start. And so I'll just get into it. So chapter 2 is the father of my children. Eventually I moved to a house not far from Charles Road. I told myself it was paradise. We lived lakeside, footsteps from the water. I was home all day, so my job was doing the washing for everyone. After that, I got drunk every day, thinking I was having a great time. In reality, I was miserable. I had friends around, although not many real ones. It seemed almost everyone I knew was as lost as me. But I kept my pride. At least I wasn't fried. Up at Charles Road, the table was always full of people. At least 6, usually 8 or 10 people would surround the dark, solid wooden dining table. In the early days, the table was usually only open for business outside of normal work hours. Back in those days, the dealers had day jobs. Where normal families would share dinner, dessert, wine, fun and laughter, the table at Charles had a red felt mat, a glass pipe, or on a bad day, a broken, stained light bulb, rolled notes or straws, the empty remains of tiny telltale bags. The conversation was always pretty serious, gangster talk. This peasant, that peasant, he said, she said bullshit. This facade and that facade. It was a lot of negative crap. Any laughter or smiles hid twisted souls who weren't really happy at all. They were all vacant people checking out for another night. I recall one night we went out for a bit. After a scuffle at the local club, we were off on a rampage. An enemy's house was targeted. I watched from the van as pretty much every window was smashed. Then we set off at a crazy pace in the hands of a fried driver around a lake. Somehow we remained on the road, through the winding stretches, miraculously making it home in one piece. It was one of those nights I became close with Wesley. I was drunk. It seemed very innocent. I felt safe and thought he was someone that I could trust. I felt like no one would hurt me while he was around. And there the attraction began. Wesley, the father of my children, was in charge of the house when I met him. He worked full-time and he had a trade, owned his car and took care of the rent for his parents' house. He owned the furniture. He was the together one, the one with his head screwed on the right way. Strong, muscular and gorgeous, he was the tall, dark and handsome, fatal trauma kind of guy I loved. He was 18 when we met, 2 years younger than me, so I thought he was too young for anything more than friends. Our friendship and trust grew over the months I spent there. He was friends with the people I knew from high school. He seemed quiet. As I think about the early days, the words shy and nervous spring to mind. Alongside that shy, quiet persona was his big, angry and forceful persona, but that was a side I didn't really understand. He seemed to lack self-confidence, but he was also a person most people wouldn't mess with. He always had stacks of money and lots of alcohol. He acted tough and was more than happy to diss the weak addicts. He would name call and play on others with low confidence. He told people, "Go on, you should just buy another bag. You know you're going to smoke that one in 5 minutes and then you'll be back around here in an hour after some more." He was pretty tough to anyone that he deemed ranked below him. I don't remember him seeing around anyone above him, but not much until later on. My messy state of mind thought he was great. He had his life sorted. It was an easy comparison to the type of people he associated with. By that stage, I'd closed my eyes to the rest of the normal world. He seemed more in control than most of the other people that were around. There were many nights and mornings when I sat around tables with the boys while everyone except him and I used meth. I knew he wasn't addicted back then because the only time he used was on the odd weekend if he was going out. His house became mine for a while. I didn't live there, but I became a part of the place. I thought he was a bit of a mysterious sweetie. We drank together often. One night someone borrowed his room, so he jumped into bed with me and slept as far from me as possible. He didn't touch me or try anything that night, and my trust for him grew. I celebrated my 21st birthday at my house by the lake. I wore a little red dress and drank gin and juice. There were various gang members and the pipe was around. None of my family or closest friends were there. At that point, I didn't have any real good girlfriends. Almost everyone at my party was part of the drug world. Some of them I barely knew, others I knew, but they were only halfway there, transformed and addicted to methamphetamine. At some point late in the night, I found myself outside on the driveway, alone with Wesley. He asked if he could take me to my room. I didn't take him seriously and I laughed. Somehow his suggestion created more of an attraction. My mind was calculating. I knew if I was going to be with someone again, I needed to know and trust them. I saw the best in Wesley. He seemed so much better than the rest. I believed he could have his dreams. He hadn't been to jail. I saw potential. I thought perhaps I could help him create a better life than he had ever imagined. I tried to resist the attraction for a while, creating excuses. The main one was that he was too young. I wasn't worried about the dealing and the life with fried, sometimes crazy people. Eventually, I realized I wanted him, and I decided that I would get him. I lived my life with faith, and I still do, and what my heart desires usually comes my way. So when we finally collided, he owned me. I wanted more than what he wanted at that stage, but he enjoyed me staying over most of the week, so I did everything I could to keep him happy. I was his willing slave. He became my addiction. Shortly before we hooked up, I had decided to get my life together again. After bouncing around for a few months, I was done being poor. I didn't feel right without a job, and I kept getting tonsillitis 3 times in a row. The antibiotics weren't working, and one of my flatmates told me he was worried about me. He thought I should stop drinking. So I took it on board and I re-enrolled in university, and I got my old job back. I was moving away and I was happy to have an income again. I needed somewhere to live, and my ex-fiance let me have the spare room while I tried to find somewhere in the city to live. He didn't mind because he was barely home anyway. Perhaps he was a bit happy to see me get away from the crowd that was leading me astray. I didn't have much luck finding a place on my own, so I stayed in the spare room. When I moved, I thought Wesley would chase me. Our conversations were usually quite long, and I wrote him letters. As I read through my diary and letters from our earliest times, I realized he held back a lot. He told me he was holding out for me, and I started getting my hopes up about us. I thought if I was the only one he was seeing, then he must have strong feelings for me. I was in love with his affection, the way he made me feel while we were together, the strong emotions. I loved the feeling of being in his arms, adored. He made me feel like I was deeply loved. His bed was heaven for me. I thought if I was just another girl, he wouldn't give me massages, stroke my hair and kiss the top of my head, and keep me in his arms throughout the night. I thought his actions showed I was his treasure. I was thoroughly intoxicated by his affection, devotion, and the feelings made me fall crazy in love. Most of what happened in the first couple of months was me pursuing him. He probably enjoyed the attention. I chased him, and I always drove to see him. He didn't visit me. I would show up at his place with my suitcase and my pillow and make myself at home. Sometime during the first few weeks, I travelled to Gold Coast, Australia, with a girlfriend. It was our 21st present to ourselves. We enjoyed the theme parks, the casino, the shopping, and the drinking. On our holiday, I discovered my friend was secretly involved with one of the guys from the bride crowd. She seemed to be in love. Her life was different to mine. She had a child and was a lot more responsible than I was. I guess something eventually happened to the relationship, and she was strong. She got out and moved herself and her child far away. We didn't see each other for a long time after she moved. I guess it was what she needed, and it was best for her and her family. Within 2 months, I'd confessed to Wesley I was falling in love. A couple of weeks later, he told me he was starting to fall for me. I wrote a lot around this time, and looking back, it seems he was holding back from commitment. He told me I was the only one, and he was falling in love with me, but he was still reluctant to become a couple. I was his girl, but not his girlfriend. It took some time for me to become his girlfriend, and then I discovered his trust issues. He was curious, but hesitant. I was his first girlfriend, his first time falling in love, and he had his walls up. He didn't want to let them down. Maybe he was unsure of all the emotion. It was the first time a girl spent weeks at his house with cooking and cleaning and trying to impress him. I was the first person to try capturing his heart. Very soon after he confessed his feelings, the hot and cold games began playing out. I thought it was his insecurity. I thought he was afraid. Up until this point, we were pretty placid. We didn't fight and we didn't argue. I felt happy, warm, and loved. I wasn't on edge daily. Looking back, it seems like after he told me his feelings, he realized what was happening and the drama began. The following days and weeks were emotional torture, nothing I'd ever experienced before. I was already in love though, and I wasn't prepared to let it go. I thought it was as good as I could get. Everything was sweet one minute, and the next we were fighting. There was always some drama. Wesley told me he didn't trust me. I recall being at home and he rang because he missed me. He said he wanted me back there. I thought his feelings were coming through, thinking, oh, he misses me, he wants me there. I felt loved. Then he would freak out, and then he would push me away again. Our conversations at that time would start out fine, And then suddenly he would say he wanted to end it. It wasn't working, or suggest I was getting back together with my ex. Some days he hung up on me. I began feeling extremely hurt a lot of the time. I cried in my little room some days. Some days I just called him back over and over again. I thought he expected me to jump in the car and drive back to him, but I still had a job in university. I had my life that still needed attending to. Sadly, despite all of the hurt and the pain, I thought he made me happy. Wesley began making comments which hurt, suggesting I was unfaithful or I didn't really care for him. I often cried, sometimes even yelling at him, telling him he was hurting me, and he'd respond by saying he was just joking. It seemed he wanted to get a reaction from me. Maybe the reactions I gave confirmed the truth about my feelings for him, or perhaps he was like many controlling, abusive men and enjoyed the reaction I gave. I don't know. And at the time, I didn't understand why things were so crazy. Many days I thought about giving up on us, feeling like I'd given my all, only to have it thrown back in my face. I tried to show him what his accusations did to me. I thought if he understood my pain, he would ease up and treat me a little better. I tried understanding him in our relationship, and then a close friend of ours told me I was teaching him to love. I was the only girlfriend he'd ever had. She advised me to forgive him for his insecurities. I followed her advice. I look back now and I see perhaps these were early warning signs of abuse. If I'd been more assertive, more confident, and more emotionally intelligent, I probably would have got myself out. I realized I didn't have an education in abusive behavior, so I was unable to identify it. My advice to someone experiencing these behaviors would be to talk to someone. Be open, because if you feel like you need to hide things, perhaps you need to question why. If you don't feel comfortable talking to someone, pick up a book from the library, do some research, and just make sure you protect yourself. So that's that chapter done. And I guess after reading that, because that's the first time I've read that in a while, I'd also sort of say, yeah, talk to someone and just, I guess, find something, a space within yourself to make sure that you have enough love and self-respect for yourself. Because I think when I look back, especially coming from where I am at this point now, I see, I didn't have that love for myself, and I didn't understand what true happiness was. So I was searching externally for this happiness. I was searching and hoping that by being with this person that I could be happy, and I was putting all of my happiness in the hope that this relationship would work out. So for me, I know I came from a pretty messed up headspace myself. So there were a few things that it could have been, but like I say, if you're feeling like you're in something that's really hot and cold and tumultuous, it is worth talking to people, and you never know, you might be able to resolve it before it gets nasty. So anyway, I hope you have a lovely night, and to those of you that have commented in the last couple of videos, it's great. I'm really glad that some people are watching it, and I'll pop some links in because I'm going to set up a little folder for all these videos. Have a wonderful night, and thank you to those of you who've tuned in tonight. I really appreciate it. Have a good one. Good night.